has always been a cornerstone for wealth creation. But with the market always evolving, there is a big question right now. Where should investors be looking at? Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Mudassir Zaidi, to unlock the secrets of dynamic real estate of India, from choosing the locations for the best investment to navigating the emerging trends. You will get all your answers in this conversation. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
How are you, sir? How are you feeling?
Very, very well. Very excited to be here.
Thank you, sir. Likewise. Sir, I really want to know, before we dive into the emotions of buying a home or the logic of involving real estate in investment portfolio, I would like you to give us an overview of the current state of India's property market.
See, overall, the property market is really booming at the moment. Post-COVID, I think if I just take us back to pre-COVID times, from 2012-13 onwards till about mid of COVID, it was only a falling knife, and the industry wasn't really a big issue. They were really struggling to survive. But once we reached that COVID stage, a lot of I think investors realized that whatever had to go wrong went wrong, and there could only be now one way up. So we saw that a lot of people started investing initially in trophy assets. So if I talk about Delhi NCR as a market, people started picking up trophy assets in Delhi per se, not in the rest of NCR. So a lot of these South Delhi areas, Central Delhi areas, which were being pre-COVID times, in the peak of times, being offered at a certain number, they were offered at 30%, 40%, 50% discount to peak numbers.
Okay.
And people, the smart investors started picking that up, and that caught on into the rest of NCR as well. So post the trophy assets in Delhi, the plotted markets in Gurgaon took off. When they became very expensive, as in the price increased very significantly, we saw that movement come into the group housing, the flats, apartments as well. So post-COVID onwards, we saw a huge increase in terms of interest. There was a lot of pent-up demand that was there in the market. People were not buying because they felt that the prices were coming down. There was a lot of, I would say, trust deficit in the developers as well, that whether if they buy, whether they will actually get their apartment or not. But once that started going away, a lot of the weaker players moved out. A lot of the stronger players became stronger. A lot of the larger listed players became more prominent in the market, and which is why we saw that the market revived very aggressively. So for the last 4 years, or 3.5, 4 years, we are seeing a significant revival in the market. Prices have increased significantly in all these years. We've now reached a stage where prices have begun to now plateau out. We are not expecting prices to increase very significantly now as they have in the last 3-4 years. But the buyer interest continues to be intact. So we are seeing, even though we are seeing some fall in terms of overall volumes as well, but still those are significant enough for us to see the market continue. So overall markets are fairly strong on the residential side. On the commercial side as well, we are doing really well overall the market from a office leasing perspective. We are seeing that this year, so we look at the numbers from a calendar year perspective. So 2024 possibly will see overall gross leasing of nearer to about 80 million square feet, which is a lifetime high. The previous lifetime high was about 60 odd million. We are expecting this to be nearer to 80 million. So overall, the entire sector, be it residential, be it commercial, offices, etc., doing very well.
That's great. So looking ahead, maybe 5 to 10 years down the line, how do you foresee the real estate market? Because you just said that the prices have started plateauing and you do not see a lot of growth in coming years. What about if you can just quantify, in 5 to 10 years, what do you foresee?
See, real estate, like any other industry, is a cyclical business, right? So we see, generally we see about 5-7 good years, Then we see 3 or 4 years where it kind of stagnates or plateaus out or even goes down as well. And then again it starts going up. So it is cyclical. The last cycle that we saw was that the downturn was much longer than than generally is seen. So it was almost about 7-8 years. Prices stagnated, came down, etc. And we've now seen a good 3-4 years of increase that has happened. So what has happened in the last 3-4 years is that the price increase has been very, very steep and substantial. However, if you look at it from a long-term perspective, if I look at the last 12 years, since 2012 to now 2024, now we're in 2025. So if I look at the data of the last 12 years, compared to any other asset class, if I look at, so somebody has an opportunity to invest in real estate versus FDs versus gold versus equities, etc. Any asset as such. Equities would on an average give you anywhere between 12 to 15% returns on a year-on-year basis. FDs will give you whatever 6 to 8% returns depending on tenure and banks, etc. If I look at gold has given much better returns overall. But if I look at the longer term returns on real estate, even with the increase in prices, significant increase in prices where properties have doubled and tripled in terms of price since the lowest numbers in the mid of COVID. If I look at the last 12-year data, the CAGR, which means that the compounded annual growth rate is not more than 6-7%. So actually, even with the prices increasing so drastically, but because they were not increasing for the last 7-8 years prior to COVID, the overall returns are actually not very, very high, even though the prices have increased significantly now. So if I look at that increase of about 6-7% returns on real estate as from a price terms, compared that to the increase in terms of buyer capability, in terms of buyers' incomes increasing. In the last 10-12 years, India has continued to grow at a decent pace. Only now in the last quarter or so, we are seeing some concerns on growth rates. But overall, in the last 10-12 years, the growth rates have been significantly there, which has resulted in people's incomes being, also growing at a decent level. On an average, 8 to 10% is what I would say. And the third factor that we look at is the cost of capital. Anybody who is investing in a property does take loans. So what is the interest rate on those loans? 10-12 years ago, they used to be in the range of 10.5-11%. In the recent past, they had come down to as low as 6.5-7% as well. Currently in the range of 8.5-9%. So if I look at that, the overall cost of capital has come down, income levels have increased, the properties have not, I would say, increased in value so much if I look at the last 10-12 years. So therefore, all in all, the property sector is still, even with the price increase, it is comparatively affordable. It sounds quite counterintuitive that ways, but it is, if I look at the hard numbers, it is not very expensive. However, because prices increased in the last 3-4 years in a very, very steep manner, a lot of the buyers, investors start thinking that, we should hold on, or we should, or many times we see that a lot of the buyers are there just to trade, buy it for 6 months, a year or 2, etc. Many of those investors hold themselves back and they don't put in the money. If they don't feel that they can get at least a 15-20% return in a year. So if those guys start pulling out, then the actual investors continue in that particular, the actual long-term investors, the end buyers, end-use buyers, they continue in that, which is actually better for the industry in the longer term. So the short-term guys, the froth, the guys who are wanting to sell out, if they are holding themselves back, then the actual genuine long-term investors are going to continue, which is actually helpful for the market. So any market, and if I look at even the equity markets, they're not unidirectional, right? I mean, they'll move up, they'll come down, there'll be sideways movement, and then they'll move up again. So similarly for real estate as well. So it's not that it is a bad sign. it is something that we feel that will be helpful in the longer term for the market to consolidate a little bit. But we feel that the market is still going strong.
Okay. So, if we see, it's believed that wealthy of the world has one common asset class in their investment portfolio. First is their family business, but the other thing is real estate. What is your take on it? You just said that overall, you just given me the overall picture of the market. What is your take on real estate being the most important asset class in the investment portfolios of the wealthy?
See, it's real estate or be it any asset class, it's a very, very personal decision, a lot of people who are looking at investments just from a financial angle, they might or might not buy real estate per se. Because many a times there are situations where the other markets, other asset classes can give better returns. But at least in the Indian way of life, the Indian psyche, real estate is not just a financial thing, but is also an emotional need, right? Anybody who wants to for example, it's real estate is also a statement. If somebody, obviously in the recent time, we've heard so many news of people buying 100 crore assets and 200 crore assets and 500 crore assets, etc. If somebody wants to make a statement that he's arrived in life,
right,
that's one big statement to make. So we see that happening as well. So real estate is not just about investment. It's not just about a return on investment. It is also about owning something which is a trophy, something that you're known for, something that you can actually make a statement about. So that's something that is also on the, I would say, horizon for a lot of the wealthy, not just in India but across the world.
Yes.
So we feel that certainly the objective is not just returns, but it is also about an emotional need for a person, for somebody to really be, especially somebody is living in his own house. It's a very different way of life versus somebody staying on rent. I mean, there are a lot of wealthy people who stay on rent as well, and they pay really, really humongous amounts of rents as well. But many of them at least want one asset that they own, but they want to be
one
at.
apna ghar is required.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sir, you just mentioned a very interesting thing, the 100 crore and 500 crore flats. Recently, we have heard a lot of news on such things. Is it a market gimmick या सच में बिक रहा है 100 करोड़ और 500 करोड़ का फ्लैट? In Gurgaon, I guess the news was of Gurgaon.
500 crore का फ्लैट तो नहीं पहुंचा है, but yes, 100 to 200 crore flats have certainly been sold, and and this is something which is not a gimmick now. Okay. In fact, we are going to be coming up with our report very, very soon, and those numbers will come out in the market as well. There are, in fact, just in Delhi NCR, there have been, I would say, more than 100 flats sold of above 50 crores this year. So it's not a gimmick. The numbers are far, far higher compared to what was being sold earlier. These are a significant increase in overall thing. But yes, flats के अलावा obviously Delhi में in South Delhi, in Central Delhi, I mean, also in the peripheral areas where there are these farmhouses in Delhi, obviously, a lot of these 100 plus crore opportunities does exist, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs and business people who do look at buying these things. So it is not a gimmick. It is certainly a reality, and it's a very thriving reality, I would say.
But sir, if the viewer wants to know कि ऐसा क्या है एक घर में जो 5 करोड़ के घर में नहीं है और 100 करोड़ के फ्लैट में है, ऐसी कौन सी amenities होती हैं जो वहाँ पे ही हैं सिर्फ, मतलब what is it? Is it worth the price or it's just a statement as you mentioned?
नहीं, देखिए statement तो है ही, no doubt about it. कि I mean, there have been instances where people who were relatively unknown, they were big in themselves, they had big businesses and they were wealthy people, but they were relatively unknown compared to the rest of the, I would say, industry. And suddenly they emerged on the scene and they bought something which was very, very substantial. And suddenly everybody took notice and said कि ये कौन है.
Right.
So, certainly that helps. But even apart from the trophy or statement value, there is obviously a lot more that all these opportunities provide. Especially if it is a gated complex. Obviously, in Delhi, you have very, very expensive properties, but they're generally not very that way is gated and in that sense. But if it is, for example, Gurgaon, where you have gated complexes, so obviously golf course, the ability to have a golf course right next door, the ability, and also since it is or since these are projects where the who's who of the location stay, it's a very different thing as well, where you are actually bumping into the who's who of this particular city in that sense. So apart from those softer issues, the amenities are unmatched compared to any other thing. And obviously the kind of clubhouse space available, the things that are available inside the clubhouses, etc. The size of the apartments, most of these 100 crore plus apartments are all 10,000 square feet and above, 10 to 20,000 square feet kind of in terms of size. So that kind of spaciousness, that kind of ability, those kind of views, golf course views and other things, and all sorts of benefits available there. It's just unmatchable. Now, whether you ask me whether it's worth the price in terms of that only the buyer can assess. The per square feet numbers for those flats are certainly far higher than what the average numbers are for the luxury segment as well. So on an average, if luxury in Gurgaon sells for in the range of 30,000-35,000 rupees a square feet, then those will be at 60,000-70,000 rupees a square feet. So you're paying the premium for being at an address where nobody else can stay in that sense.
Sir, 100 crore ka flat, so let's assume that it's not very accessible to everyone. But buying apna ghar is a milestone for everyone. People have grown up listening to their moms ki ek din apna ghar banayenge, is jagah pe zameen lenge. So now if someone is maybe in their late 20s or maybe early 20s for that matter, and the person has a dream to buy their own home, and is it too early to think of buying a home? Is it practical? How can they actually, steadily get that home, achieve that dream to buy a home? Yeah.
See, my personal opinion, again, everybody has their way of thinking, especially the Gen Z and the millennials. Most of them think that, obviously, we've grown up in a certain manner. Our parents had a certain thought process. Owning one home was one, which gave you a lot of emotional satisfaction, gave you a sense of, I would say, safety and security and being rooted to one place. Those things are changing now. A lot of the younger generation, the ones who are just getting into the workforce now, as you said, the early 20s kind of a thing. Many of them don't think from that angle. They don't feel rooted to one city as such.
Right.
So many a times they think that buying a home is actually a hindrance to their mobility in that sense. They want to be mobile in that sense, upwardly mobile in the sense that whatever opportunity it comes up, if it is here in Delhi NCR or in Mumbai or Bangalore or wherever else, they want to be free to move around till they know actually where they want to eventually settle down for the longer term. If everybody reaches a time in life where they will feel finally that now it's time to settle down somewhere. For many people it is after they get married. For many people, or for other people it might be when they have children, where children start going to school and they start feeling that now it's too much of a disturbance to keep changing schools and all that. Those kind of things do come in. So there are obviously different thoughts to different people. But yes, I certainly believe that people should try and get into buying something as early as possible. It might not be something that you want to stay in right at the start. It's natural that somebody who's just entered the workforce will not be earning enough to be eventually staying in a place where he will eventually long term want to be there.
Okay.
But it is good to buy something even if it's in the periphery, even if it is, for example, and many people are not from the larger cities that they're eventually working in. Maybe they're from a smaller city or tier 2 town, where they come from. They could possibly buy it wherever they are from as well. In fact, tier 2, tier 3 cities have actually seen a far better growth in terms of prices, in terms of real estate as a product availability, especially state capitals. Who are not metros as such, but tier 1 cities in themselves. They have seen really humongous growth there as well. So it's not just the top 8-10 cities that have really seen a good growth in real estate, especially residential. State capitals and other larger cities of various states have seen humongous growth. So it could be there as well.
So sorry to interrupt, but can you just give me like 3 top cities, or it can be tier 1, tier 2, where the upcoming locations that savvy investors should look at?
So apart from the top 8-10 cities, which are the metros and the other large commercial centers, IT centers, etc., state capitals, for example, like Lucknow, fabulous growth. I mean, in the last 8-10 years, the city is unrecognizable in terms of the growth, in terms of the infra, etc. Lucknow, be it Jaipur, be it Chandigarh, these are state capitals, or even other cities in the mid of India, or even the east of India, be it Bhubaneswar, Indore. I mean, all these places in themselves are very, very important, capitals in themselves. So generally, we tend to talk about a Delhi or a Mumbai or a Bangalore, etc., because these are far more in the news and they get talked about, and for example, companies like us or consultants like us track these cities a lot more. But the growth in the state capitals and other larger business cities is actually maybe even better in some of the cities. So like the cities that I mentioned, they've grown in a very, very fast manner. The availability is...
Can you quantify the difference of growth between these?
See, the thing is that, in some of the cities, so in the last 3-4 years or so, for example, Delhi NCR, the growth has largely been on the Gurgaon side. So if I look at Delhi NCR as a whole, which has multiple cities as such. So Delhi per se in the center, and then you have Gurgaon, Faridabad on the Haryana side, and then you have Ghaziabad, Noida and Greater Noida as such on the UP side. If you look at the numbers that come out in the reports, in the longer term average, for example, for Gurgaon would have been in terms of proportion about 25% of the market in terms of volumes. But in the last 3-4 years, it has come up to 50% of the market. So, the market in Gurgaon has, in a way, in terms of size, doubled in terms of value. So the growth has largely been in Gurgaon, versus where Greater Noida and other places used to be the growth drivers for NCR in terms of volumes. And we've seen, therefore, the larger price increases coming in Gurgaon that way. Yes. So if I look at Gurgaon, which is maybe slightly, I would say, an outlier in that sense, because it has had a disproportionately high growth. If I look at the other Noida, Greater Noida things, the growth has been more muted in that sense comparatively, even though we've seen decent growth there as well. But if I look at, for example, a Lucknow or other places, etc., the price increases have been even higher. In terms of growing in the range of about 25-30% a year in some of the in-demand parts of, for example, these cities. So it has been fairly strong. So it's not that the growth has only been seen in the larger metros. The growth has got, I would say, spread out to the other large cities as well. I would say the next 10-15 cities, apart from the top 8-10 cities, have also seen a decent amount of growth coming in real estate. Because what happens is that they become the regional magnets for investments. So if I, for example, if I continue taking the example of Lucknow, so cities in the vicinity, like for example, people from the other smaller cities of UP will have more access to come to Lucknow rather than coming into Delhi NCR, which is the nearest large metro. So they would want to be there because it is, they understand those markets, they would have possibly connects out there, they would have people who they can rely on to help them do that. And maybe a large market like Delhi NCR or going to Bombay or Bangalore seems too daunting for them. So those regional state capitals become very, very important for a lot of people out there.
Okay.
So, so therefore, I would say that in that sense, most of these areas have also seen a decent enough growth.
The person who is a novice investor, wants to invest, dreaming to buy a home, sir, is it a bad idea to consider Delhi NCR, Bangalore and Mumbai at this point? Is the market not stagnant enough?
No, I don't think the market is stagnating. Yes, the rate of increase in prices has become muted, where it was growing at 15, 20, 25% returns every year because there was a lot of new products being launched at higher prices, etc. We will now see slightly more muted growth, I would say single-digit growths rather than double-digit growths in terms of prices, etc. So I don't expect that these markets are going to, so for some more time, we definitely see that growth continuing to be there. Okay. As I've said, it is a cyclical market. It is not going to be, unidirectional forever. But I still see a few more years of decent years continuing to be there before we see, demand waning off or prices really starting to come off. So at the moment, we see that the demand will continue to be there for some more time.
So what is the scene in Ayodhya after the Ram Mandir's sthapna? Is the growth there for real estate? What do you think?
So when the Pran Pratishtha happened, prior to that, for a couple of years prior to that, and even for about a year, I would say, not even a year, I would say it's not even a year since then, I would say about 6-8 months post that, the level of demand and euphoria and excitement about it was very, very high.
Okay.
So a couple of years before the actual Pran Pratishtha, there was a lot of price increases that happened because a lot of people were investing into land there for eventual use into something that would come about,
business commercial.
no, be it hotels, be it. So obviously the idea was that once the the temple becomes accessible to everybody, there would be a lot of people who would start coming there. Ayodhya is therefore at the moment not suited to basically handle all that number of devotees and pilgrims that will come. So there was definitely a need for capacity expansion out there. So be it hotels, be it short-term stay options, or be it residential where people want to stay there. Maybe people want to stay there for a decent amount of time. Those kind of things. Then support opportunities for that. Be it commercial, retail, and other things. So there was a lot of anticipation on that. But we certainly feel in the last 3-4 months, there has been a slight, I would say, cooling off effect that we are seeing in all things. So in terms of people looking at opportunities to buy land, to build something, people are now waiting for the actual inauguration, which I guess is expected to happen in 2027 or around that time. I think people want to actually see the thing get inaugurated in a full-fledged manner before really putting in the money. But there is a significant amount of investor interest which has already come in, which I think needs to get utilized, and then further investments will come in.
Okay. So let's go into the personal finance angle of it, because, the overall picture of the real estate market is great. And it's a cyclical business, as you said, and the growth ups and downs will be there. But a straight question. If a person has 50 to 70 lakh rupees right now, और उसे नॉर्थ इंडिया में कहीं पे इन्वेस्ट करना चाहता है, दिल्ली एनसीआर में ऐसी कौन सी 3 जगह आप बताएंगे जहाँ पे they should park their money?
Are you saying that 50 to 70 lakhs is the budget, or is that he has that money and he can borrow more?
It's the budget.
Is the budget. So 50 to 70 is what he wants to invest
Yes, for a home.
Okay.
For a house.
For a
Yes.
home. And is this something that he's just looking at it from an investment perspective or
Yes.
from an investment perspective? See, what we are seeing currently, obviously the regular part or the usual part of most of Delhi NCR has already seen price increases significantly. So 50 to 70 lakhs is becoming now a challenge for a lot of people who want to hit that, look at that budget. So we are seeing that, even in the Greater Noida region, which was very, very affordable at one point of time, prices have increased to a level where a decent sized unit will be actually upwards of that number.
Okay.
But we are still seeing that a lot of action in the last couple of years has come in the peripheral towns around Delhi NCR. Okay. So any large, I would say, any main highway that is leading out of Delhi NCR and within an hour or hour and a half drive from the city is seeing a lot of action. So for example, the highway towards Chandigarh, so you have cities or towns starting from Sonipat to Panipat to Karnal, etc. They have seen a lot of action coming in, and there you can get, for example, plotted developments where people can invest and buy plots in that kind of ticket size as well. Or we are now also seeing newer highways that are going out of the city. So we are seeing a lot of investor or developer interest coming in from the newer infra projects which are going out of the city. So for example, UER2, which is now getting completed in the next year or so. That goes towards and meets up with that Chandigarh highway. But there is an entire new axis of accessibility which has come about from UER2. So again, towns and places which are accessible from UER but can lead back to Delhi within an hour's driving distance. Those are now seeing, so we'll see in the next year or two a lot of activity happening in those locations. Or maybe some peripheral areas, so NH8 leading towards Jaipur and all that. We still see a lot of plotted developments and even sometimes apartment complexes in that price range available for a lot of people. So my sense is that those could be decent opportunities to look at.
Okay, great. Sir, investment is definitely something. आजकल investment का content is all over there on internet, right? People have started watching politics less and finance and economy more. So हम लोग जब भी real estate की बात करते हैं about investments, it's the end goal, I feel. You start with FDs, you start with NPS, you start with equities, but in the end, everybody wants to have that one piece of land. For maybe एक घर, एक मकान अपना. But sir, real estate की जितनी हम बात करें, it's not that accessible to people, right? मतलब real estate में अगर wealth बहुत ज़्यादा भी है, आपके पास पहले उतना wealth होना चाहिए so that you can park the money to buy the real estate. If we ask you that a person who's maybe earning under 1 lakh rupees at this point, and what will be the right time for that person to consider real estate, or कैसे वो steadily step by step, if you can tell me, कि how do that person achieve that goal?
See, general जो personal finance में रहता है, there are 2-3 rules that one has to really look at, even if somebody is not an expert in investing. There are certain basic rules that one needs to really look at. One is that you need to spread your risk, so you can't have all your eggs in one basket. So it can't be that all your money is in real estate or all your money is in equity or all your money is in gold, etc. It's best to spread out your risk and therefore have in different asset classes, because at various points in time, different asset classes have performed in a very, very different manner. Right. Obviously, for real estate had a downturn for about 7-8 years in that time, which was fairly long from a regular what cycles that we've seen earlier. So and during the same time, equity really gave good returns in that way. So one needs to spread out. So that is one aspect that needs to be understood by everybody. Secondly, it's also important not to overstretch oneself. Okay. So for example, if you said ke 1 lakh ki salary hai, how much can I, kind of do? Thankfully, with a lot of people, they usually are definitely well versed with investment as well. And nobody 1 lakh ki salary, unless he has already substantial savings there, it definitely will be the case that they will take a loan in that sense. Right. So banks also will, what the eligibilities, etc. They will be able to guide in terms of eligibilities also. तो उसमें ऑटोमेटिकली इवन अगर आपको पता भी नहीं है तो भी आपको समझ में आ ही जाएगा कितना आपको लोन मिल सकता है, तो आपको आपका बजट भी आपको क्लैरिटी आ जाएगा. जनरली थंब रूल ये रहता है कि 50% ऑफ द नेट टेक होम, अगर आप 1 लाख रुपए नेट टेक होम की बात कर रहे हैं तो 50,000 से ज़्यादा का EMI बैंक विल नॉट अलाउ ऑन द लोन. सो 50,000 की EMI इफ यू वर्क बैकवर्ड, सो 50,000 की EMI जो है आपको एक सर्टन अमाउंट ऑफ लोन तक ले जाएगा, मे बी 60-70 lakhs तक. जनरली 800-900 रुपए पर लाख रफली जो है वो रहेगा इन द सेंस
किस बजट का होम उनको टारगेट करना चाहिए.
सो वही मैं कह रहा हूँ कि सो इन दैट सेंस कि अगर आप लोन ले सकते हैं 50 से 60 लाख का, विच जनरली इज अबाउट 70-80%, 75-80% ऑफ द ओवरऑल वैल्यू ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टी, तो आप बेसिकली समझिए कि आप 70-80 लाख तक का जा सकते हैं इन दैट सेंस, क्योंकि आपको 20% या 25% आपको पुट अप करना है. बाकी 75-80% डिपेंडिंग ऑन द लोन, अगेन वो बैंक से भी रहता है कि कितना लोन तक, जितना बढ़ जाता है उतना वो आपका जो आपको जो शेयर पुट अप करना होता है वो बढ़ जाता है. सो छोटे लोन्स के लिए 10-90 का भी रेशो हो सकता है, बड़े लोन्स के लिए 25-75 जाता है. तो अगर बड़ा आप लोन ले रहे हैं तो 25-75 का रहेगा, आपको 25% पुट अप करना है. अगर मिडिल लोन है तो तकरीबन 20% पुट अप करना है. तो अगर आपको मिल रहा है इन दैट सेंस अबाउट 70-80 lakhs तक का लोन, तो आप अपना उतना उसको 80% मान के 75-80% मान के बाकी का 20% ऐड करके दैट basically you'll still stay under a crore kind of a budget size in that sense. तो फिर you can always understand कि इस range में किस लोकेशन में आ सकता है आपके लिए. सो इट कुड बी इन द लार्जर सिटीज़, पेरिफेरल एरियाज ऑफ अ लार्जर सिटी, और यू कुड गो इनटू अ पेरिफेरल सिटी एज वेल जहाँ पर आप ले सकते हैं. बट मेरा मानना है कि डेफिनेटली फॉर एनीबॉडी हू इज़ इन अर्ली इन हिज करियर एज वेल, मेरे हिसाब से वन शुड स्टार्ट गेटिंग इनटू बाइंग समथिंग एट द अर्लीस्ट. Because prices, once they increase, it becomes difficult to latch onto this. In other asset classes, जैसे equity हो या gold हो या debt instruments हो, ticket sizes are not a problem. आपके पास 1 लाख है, आप 1 लाख डालिए, आपके 50,000 डालिए. But obviously because homes are of a certain size and of a certain ticket size, it becomes difficult to get in if you're not saved up enough. तो maybe कई बार ये होता है कि जो लोग जो आपका जो फॉर एग्जांपल 20 या 25% पुट अप करना है, पहले वो सेव करने के लिए आप जो है FDs एंड डेट इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स एंड अदर इन्वेस्टमेंट जो भी है, हाँ, जो थोड़ा सा सेफ हो उसमें आप डाल के वो बिल्डअप करिए. फिर वंस यू हैव इनफ टू टू पुट इन दैट अबाउट 20-25%, तब आप लोन लेके देन यू पुट इट इनटू regular home as well. And then आपके फिर EMI चलेंगे. once your salaries increase, then whatever further you start saving, that you start investing into other asset classes. तो वो एक आपका एक पूरा एक वो चलता रहेगा आपका साइकिल.
So what is the ideal age? क्या 25 साल की उम्र वाले इंसान को सोच लेना चाहिए कि I will buy a home in next 15 years? Is it too early? Is it too childish to think that?
No, there is no thumb rule कि 25 में नहीं करना चाहिए या 35 के बाद ही करना चाहिए. There is no thumb rule. However, if you look at the usual case where if you look at the buyer profile in most housing projects, if you look at the data there, generally what we see कि जितना महंगा होता जाता है प्रोजेक्ट, उतना एज भी ज़्यादा होती है बायर की. बायर का प्रोफाइल जो है कहीं ज़्यादा होता है. सो इफ़ यू लुक एट अ 5-10 crore 15 crore property, then generally 40s में ही 40s के above ही होता है आदमी, unless के he's a business owner and all that, or maybe he has got far larger funds from business. But general जो देखा गया है कि home loans लेके जो करते हैं, तो generally in that range आपके 40s and above होते हैं. जितना आप lower ticket size होता है, yes, the age profile can be lower as well. So it's nothing कि 25 साल की उम्र में नहीं सोचना चाहिए, definitely सोचना चाहिए. अगर ability है, financial ability है, तो definitely करना चाहिए मेरे हिसाब से.
Sir, in 20s, when people are 20s to 30s, okay, people don't have that much capital in hand to put it in real estate, but they want to invest in the properties. We are listening to all these words like fractional ownership and a lot of such concepts. Can you just explain that to me? And also, would you ever buy anything on fractional ownership? Is that a good concept?
No, it's a good concept. It's I would say a slightly early stage concept. It has to settle down fully, in that sense कि theoretically it is great, but how it is executed, who executes that, who is the entity running all those schemes, etc., they become very, very important. Okay. Because real estate per se is not a very liquid kind of a scenario, right? So आप fractional में अगर जा रहे हैं, so there are multiple types of things that one can get into. Fractional ownership एक है, REITs are another area. अब recently SME REITs भी allow कर दिए गए हैं. So then one does not need to really be in a very large REIT where there's thousands of crores and you're just one smaller bit in that. For HNIs, etc., SME REITs allow kar diye hain, where even a single floor in a large, for example, commercial building, they're allowing as SME REITs in that sense. So again, newer concepts. So basically क्या होता है कि fractional में ये दो फायदे हैं. एक तो ये है कि there is an entity managing the entire thing, in the sense they are supposedly experts in that, they understand it, and they are able to take the right decisions. There is a chance that if you do it on your own, you might not be able to take the right decision, or you might not have the ability to execute things in the right manner. So there are experts who are very well at doing that. So buying the right kind, buying at the right price. Then as and when, for example, if it is a commercial, generally fractional at the moment is being applied to commercial properties, rented properties as such. So wo the right kind of tenants, leasing, collecting leases, managing the property, selling it as and when it comes to the right price and all that. So it requires an active management as such. So that management aspect, and the other is the size of the assets. So in terms of commercial assets as well, unless it is of a certain size and of a certain pedigree, it doesn't carry that much weight. Otherwise, it becomes an issue managing those things. So, ऐसा नहीं है कि नहीं manage हो सकता, but you can get far better returns and far better, for example, properties and far better tenants, etc. And therefore, in that sense, slightly safer investment by going larger, etc. So fractional में there are multiple people who are coming together to do that. So फिर your investment size, or rather the fractional ownership of the entire asset, the overall size is much larger. So you can partake in a much better asset that way. So वो फायदे हैं, लेकिन obviously we need to see track records, we need to see how things are going about, because things can go wrong as well. What if they don't get in the right property? What if they're not able to exit it at the right time? What if they're not able to rent it out at the right time, etc., etc. So those are things that are certain concerns, but it is theoretically, it is a good concept that one needs to evaluate. On the other side, like I said, REITs are anyways available. REITs are much larger, much more liquid investments because they're listed on the, and also very actively traded on the exchange, etc.
So what is the minimum amount I should have to invest?
There's the unit sizes are very small. So ऐसा depending on what the asset value is, it can be in the hundreds also. So it's nothing that it requires any substantial. The entire reason why REITs came in was to, in a way, democratize the entire availability of assets, rather than having to invest crores to buy something. Here you are partaking in that business, which is, for example, so in India it's largely again been commercial assets, mostly office assets. There is one retail REIT as well. But most of them are commercial rent yielding assets.
Okay.
So here there is something that you're getting into where you're getting the rentals out of marquee assets in the market. That's the idea. But you don't have to put in crores on that. You can, even if you just want to buy one unit, it can be in the hundreds also. So it's not very, very high. So your liquidity becomes very easy. It's highly tradable, and your investment size can be as small as whatever you want.
So what kind of growth that we see in this then?
See, rented assets are more, I would say, more stable in that sense, because majority of money that the person is making is through the rental returns.
Okay.
So on an average in today's markets, generally rental returns in the range of about 7 to 9% returns depending on market and depending on asset, etc. So that goes to the investor as well. However, the unit value can go up and down basis the demand and supply, and also the yield contraction. So for example, in today's time, if something is available at a 9% cap rate, basically if the cap rate goes down, the value goes up. It's an inverse relationship. So if the market starts trading the asset at a lower cap rate, then the unit value starts going up. So one is the rent yield that is coming out of the portfolio because it is leased out to tenants, to large companies, etc. And the other is so whatever is the expected return from an asset. So for example, like I said, 10 years ago, home loans were at 10-11%. They came down to 7%. So expectations, keep changing. Sometimes from a loan, the expectation is it will be available at 10.5, 11. At different market times, it will come down to 7. Today, it is 8.5, 9. So other asset classes also tend to peg themselves to, competing assets. Okay. So office, be it a rental yield, be it a rental yield fund, or when you're directly investing into a rented asset in that sense, something which has already been leased out and which is earning a return, the value of that asset can go up and down depending on the yield that is expected out of that. Somebody might be okay to buy it at a 6% cap rate. Somebody will say, no, I'm not going to buy it unless I get an 8% yield out of it, etc. So depending on the market and depending on the asset, the yield expectations can go up and down.
So sir, अगर मेरे पास 500 रुपए हैं और मैं हर महीने म्यूचुअल फंड में SIP करती हूँ और मैं REITs में भी 500 रुपए हर महीने डाल रही हूँ, तो are you saying that, am I correct that REIT का जो return होगा वो that can be bit lower than the equity mutual fund?
Yes. See, equity, obviously depending on the type of fund you're investing in, be it large cap, small cap, mid cap, multi cap, things can be very different. However, REITs are supposed to be more stable, but comparatively slightly lesser. But not that it can't go higher, because if you're, for example, if you enter at a time when the yield contraction is happening. Right. So if I look at that scenario, the yield contraction is happening and the values are going up because of the yield expectations getting contracted, then yes, there'll be far higher return. But in a regular scenario, the idea is that you will get stable returns out of the rent that is being received from the tenants in that, and there'll be some capital gains through the increase in capital value, because properties will increase in capital value and property in a regular manner, and they might also increase in value due to cap rate contraction. So depending on different market scenarios, the combination of rent yield, as in whatever you're getting, and the capital increase might be different. So it can be higher also, but generally it is not designed to be competing with equity in that sense, even though it is available on the equity exchange or rather on the exchange. But it is not in the equity segment. You are taking a much higher risk in anticipation of a higher reward. Here this is more stable, therefore you are happy with a slightly lower reward. That's the idea.
So it is believed that when you are young, your most of the major part of your investment should go to something which is high reward, high risk, right? And stability की तरफ जैसे जैसे you age, उस तरीके से जाना चाहिए. तो आपको लगता है कि REITs में invest करना in early 20s can be skipped?
I would say it is a mid risk kind of a thing, because it's not like a fixed income thing where things will not change, and you know what you're getting at the end of the tenure. Here the unit value will go up or down depending on the market scenario. Depending on the REIT itself, for example, they've come in at a time where, for example, the portfolio is 95% leased. But what if, for example, COVID happened,
right,
and everybody was working from home? There was a lot of there were a lot of instances where tenants said, we are working from home for 2 years, we're not taking an office, for example. What happens in that scenario?
Right.
That means your ability to collect, so for example, your occupancy comes down from 95 to 75, for example, because 20% have moved out.
Yes.
So your ability to earn on that part of the portfolio that you've rented out reduces.
Right.
So that risk is there. So it's a medium risk kind of a thing. So I will not say not to look at it. Obviously, for an early stage investor, or rather somebody who is at an early age in that
Right.
sense, his risk-taking ability is higher, and his possibly his fixed expenses are lower, and therefore his ability to lose money, even though obviously we've not, unless you really make bad decisions, people have made decent amounts of money, because economy has continued to grow. If economy has continued to grow, the companies have continued to grow, both from a revenue perspective as well as from a profitability perspective, which shows up in their valuations as well. So as long as the economy is doing well, as long as because of the economies companies are doing well, if you end up doing, if you're not yourself investing directly into equities, equity shares themselves, I think going through mutual funds, even if it is a slightly higher risk kind of a mutual fund, it's fairly understandable. And to kind of give some level of, I would say, annuity income, maybe a REIT can certainly be looked at along with that as well. But certainly for an early age person, having a higher FD, etc. in the portfolio doesn't make sense. I think FDs should only be, or FDs, or maybe short-term funds like treasury, mutual funds, short-term ones. Those are only there from a sake of emergency funds that you require.
We're talking about debt funds.
Very short-term debt funds, or they're called treasury funds as well.
Right.
So they have very, very short maturities. So they're not very, very volatile that way. So either FDs or these kind of mutual funds, which are very easily, as in you give them and you have money, the next day in your account. So those largely, which are lower in terms of risk, can be utilized for having emergency funds in that sense. So 3-4 months, 6 months, whatever, different levels of emergency funds required that way. So maybe about 5-6 months of your monthly expenses can be kept in that. Over and above that, you invest into risk-taking opportunities.
Sir, I have a question here, that you just said that real estate is not very liquid asset, right? Also, as we're discussing risk here, if I, in my 30s, like a property maybe somewhere, any area, and 40 lakh मैंने उसमें डाल दिए हैं, and maybe after 5-10 years I really want that money to invest in some other property, and I'm not very wealthy as a person that I can invest in 3 properties altogether. So वहाँ पे जो आपका पैसा फंस जाता है, what to do about it then?
See, that is a risk which is certainly there,
Yeah.
and which is why real estate not being liquid is exactly what that means. That it is not something that you can, many times when it is very, very in demand kind of a property, etc., you can obviously have a quick kind of a transaction also. But even that quick transaction takes time, because you want people to see it, you want people People don't tend to just do it across the counter. There's no fixed price in that, right? I mean, there will be negotiations. People don't want to show any desperation. They will take time. They will give, both sides will not show any desperation. So it takes time. So sometimes even a quick deal is 2-3 months in that sense. And if you want something like an equity thing, you give a sell request, you have money in your account the next day. You know, so obviously one has to put money into real estate, where one does not need it in a very, very immediate sense.
Right.
But obviously there are instances in life where people tend to reach a situation where they have to liquidate.
Right.
But there is no special thing that you can just continue to attempt selling it. You know, obviously.
They get the whole money back?
Yeah, of course. It's not that. So if you're talking about, you know, investing with a builder who has not completed the project and you want your money back, many a times the builder does not want to, obviously, you know, obviously if you refund them, ask the builder for a refund, there are clauses in the builder-buyer agreement which will give you, but those are not very favorable to the buyer.
Right.
So it is always better off that you sell it in the market and transfer that in the buyer's in the builder's books to the new buyer. So that is always what is generally done. So you sell that in the market and you pay a transfer fee to get it transferred to the new buyer. That's how it is usually done. But cancelling it with the builder, getting a refund, etc., generally is not what most people would do.
Okay, because a funny situation, I maybe won something in कौन बनेगा करोड़पति. I got 1 crore rupees और मैंने जाके कहीं घर खरीद लिया because मुझे लगता है कि मुझे घर खरीद लेना चाहिए. And maybe after 5 years मुझे लगता है कि एरिया भी खराब है and I really don't want to buy this. I want to buy something better. तो this can happen.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, ये तो बहुत common है कि a lot of people buy for the sake of investment. They have no plan to actually use that. So they buy it at an early stage in the property's life cycle, and they generally will sell it 3, 4, 5 years later when it is, for example, near ready or when it is completed as well. So it happens usually. That's not nothing which is different. So people will buy at an early stage, sell it 3, 4, 5 years later. At that time, there are people who want to buy it and there are people who don't want to buy at an early stage, who want to buy but they want a new property. They want to buy it at the earliest thing when it is ready. They don't want to take any risk with the developer. So they will buy a ready to move property, and that gives you the best price at that point in time.
For a good decision, what are the key metrics that an investor should know? If you could just, simplify the IRR, the ROI, and rental yield, and what is the difference between rental yield and rental income for our viewers?
See, decision-making matrix is going to be, there are certain things that everybody needs to look at, and there are certain things that will be, I would say, peculiar or particular to people in that sense. For example, basic things like, for example, in terms of the developer per se, the track record of the developer, for example. So some of the good names who have been in the market for a long time, who have delivered good quality stuff on time, etc. That's something which is, in fact, that was the problem prior to COVID when RERA had not come in. In 2016, the RERA Act came in. Prior to that, the difference between a very good developer and a fly-by-night operator, people would get to know only once that guy, stopped activity on the project. So many a time it was, where a lot of developers, some of them who are not the most scrupulous, would take money out of one project, put it into another, use that money into buying other lands, etc. So once the market, kind of got affected, they would get all the projects would get affected at the same time. So understanding the track record, the pedigree of the developer is very, very important. Thankfully, with COVID, a lot of the guys who are weak and who are not there, in terms of strength and track record, they've kind of fallen by the wayside, and thankfully the market has become stronger. And now with RERA as well, the safeguards in the Act have also made it more safer, because any developer, when they sell and take customer advances, they can't take out more than 30% of that for any other purpose, because 70% has to be locked in an escrow and utilized only in that project. So it has become safer that ways. But like I said, track record, pedigree of the developer, that is key, most important. Then obviously, what also really adds to the overall returns on investment, be it whether you're investing only for the sake of investment or you're actually buying it for eventually living there. For example, one needs to understand the infrastructure scene that is coming. So for example, newer roads getting planned, newer, for example, projects coming up, etc. That futuristic information, if one has access to, one will be able to really anticipate where the thing is moving. So for example, Jewar Airport was announced 5-6 years ago. It's now becoming a reality. If somebody had information and access to it, that this is something which is going to come about, and starts buying before it comes about, and eventually this gets announced, now gets delivered, the prices of the properties, be it land or any other aspect somebody would have taken at that time 6, 8, 10 years ago, versus now the increase would have been significant. So understanding of infrastructure, new infrastructure coming up, understanding of economic, for example, centers of activity. So for example, Noida, Greater Noida announced a certain industrial policy which is going to look at promoting a certain type of industry, for example. Or for example, any other policy comes up where there is a certain type of thing which is getting promoted in that sense. Then you know that there is a lot of investment coming in, there are a lot of economic interest coming in, people will come, for example, factories will come up, offices will come up, people will stay there, suddenly things will start moving. So understanding of future potential through infra, through newer initiatives, through any major economic development that can happen is very, very important. So these things that need to be understood. And finally, coming down to the brass tacks, which is, whether, all the approvals have been taken under RERA, whether you're, for example, if and many a times banks play a very good role. When you take a home loan, they will approve a property because they have seen the papers of the apartment or from the developer, and either pre-approved or while you're applying for a loan, getting an approval that yes, we can give a loan because the property is fine to be lent on. So a lot of these background checks, etc., are very important. And then depending on what one stage is at in life, so if you have kids, then the the social infra in that sense, what type of schools are available, how far are they available, eventually if they go to college, are there colleges which are accessible, or will you have to change cities to access something in that sense, level of infrastructure which is coming in, quality of infrastructure, roads and rail and other things, etc. A lot of stuff that will, then the then the gentry in the vicinity, that is also very, very valuable, the type of people who are staying there. Or for example, the social infrastructure that is coming in the vicinity, for example, retail spaces, markets, places, other things which will help in in terms of bettering your quality of life, etc. So those kind of things that one will have to be looking at when taking a decision.
So if someone has 5 to 10 years of investment horizon, what kind of properties they should invest in? Because it can be plots, it can be apartments, commercial real estate properties. But the thing is, though on internet we have heard that land is a scarce asset, right? And diamonds can be manufactured, but not the land. What do you think?
See, you're absolutely right. Land cannot be manufactured or added. Jo hai, wo hai. And also, data shows that over a long period of time, for the last, I would say, 30, 40, 50 years, land has given the best return. Land itself, not apartments, not offices. Pure raw land has given the best returns. So अगर किसी के पास ये understanding है और ये ability है to buy lands, and like I said, कि land buying is also a science and an art. It's not just you go and buy land anywhere. What is the future potential is dependent on what can happen out there. So for example, infrastructure कुछ आने वाला है, कुछ economic activity आने वाली है, कुछ वहाँ पर policy decision ऐसा कुछ होने वाला है which could result into something substantial out there. तो वो है. You know, for example, things are getting, cities are expanding, etc. If it is moving in that direction, eventually 5-10 साल बाद जो है वहाँ पर कुछ you know, people will start living there, etc. उसका कुछ आ सकता है. So land is by far the best, but not everybody is able to do that. Not everybody has the wherewithal to really go and buy lands, etc. It is a difficult, land buying is a very, very difficult subject, not just because of trying to estimate what it is, but because land in India is not the most cleanest form of asset, because title issues होते हैं, generally land जो hereditary होती है, उसमें कई सारे complications होते हैं. So apart from that, I would say कि everything is finally, every asset class, be it real estate, be it any sub asset class within real estate, is finally connected with the economy. ठीक है. अगर आप expect करते हैं कि India grow करेगा at 6, 7, 8% growth rates every year, then real estate will also grow at a decent number. Because finally, economy अगर God forbid नहीं किसी वजह से grow करती है, ये start stagnating, then that will have an effect on people's incomes, that will have an effect on their ability to have disposable incomes, their ability to invest, their ability to commit to large expenses like EMIs and real estate, which will have an effect on obviously real estate per se.
Basically spending pattern changes accordingly.
So अगर आप ये believe करते हैं economy चलने वाली है, grow करने वाली है, if you believe in the India growth story, then real estate is there for you. Along with commercial as well, because commercial में ये है कि भाई again retail हो या offices हो, economy चलेगी तो लोग companies will see growths, they'll hire more, they'll take more office space, more people working, they'll end up spending, retail does well. So everything finally is connected back with the economy. So if the India growth story is intact, then real estate will also continue to be intact, because we've now seen a large long-term consolidation that has happened, especially in the residential front. My expectation is that this will continue in the next few years. Obviously, growth rates might be muted initially, then might grow in a decent frame of time, and then might also be for in the sideways movement for some time, etc. Because like I said, any market will have ups and downs. But in the longer term, if you're looking at 10-year horizon, etc., real estate is definitely the way to go to.
And the land is the best.
Land, if somebody is able to do it, land is, like I said, is not an easy thing to do. Land certainly is one. If I look at pure play data, land values have grown at such a rate that they've given the best returns.
So land investment का कोई loss होता है क्या? जैसा कि आपने अभी बताया कि land ना घटाई जा सकती है, ना बढ़ाई जा सकती है. अगर मैंने बिना कोई डेटा चेक किए भी किसी लैंड में अपना पैसा पार्क कर दिया है, तो even if it's of no use right now, it will still be used, na? How is?
Not really. See, land is valuable because of the value because of the use it can be put to. The value is attached to the use. So, for example, आपको मैं अभी Delhi NCR का ही example दूँ. एक तरफ गुड़गांव है, एक तरफ नोएडा, ग्रेटर नोएडा and all that है. A lot of developments have happened because clear land acquisition policies came about. Land got acquired, or rather, इधर अगर नोएडा, ग्रेटर नोएडा में land got acquired and then leased out and got developed. In Gurgaon, they got bought by developers or collaborated by developers, and then they got converted into something else, and then something came about and the land values increased. If you look at, for example, the land pooling policy in Delhi, implementation of that, execution of that has been challenging. So, वो क्योंकि execute नहीं हो पाया है, land values in some of the areas in Delhi, जहाँ पर a lot of development was supposed to come, वो नहीं हुआ, तो land values are stagnating out there. In a similar time frame in the last 8-10 years, maybe lands across the border in for example Gurgaon have appreciated 5-10 times in many of the areas. So it's very important to understand what use it can be put to. If it is just agricultural for example, it has limited value. If it can be converted into residential, it has a different value. If it can be converted into commercial, it has a different value. So different usages will determine what values come on the land command. So land is, like I said, is important, but not easy because you need to understand a lot. So for a lot of people, it's not a regular thing. I've just mentioned it from a point of view of pure play historical data. Right. But for regular people who are not into this land trading, etc., for them, obviously residential real estate, be it plots, be it apartments, etc., all of them will give a decent return in the long term.
Please quantify, sir.
No, it's very difficult to quantify exactly. See, on an average, if time, if all continues well, India continues growing, I would say that, in the 8-10% returns on an average.
Are we talking about residential here?
Mostly residential should be possible. If you don't see any, for example, stress on the economy and other things, etc., then 8-10%. Obviously, I'm not expecting 25-30% returns because we've seen that for the last 3-4 years. Things will get muted down, but I still see 8-10% on an average.
And what about commercial, sir?
See, commercial, anyways, the cap rates in today's markets are about 7-8% returns anyways are there. For individuals, many a times they can go down to as much as 5.5 to 6.5% also. But there the increases in values in terms of capital values are more, I would say, since it is connected to how much the property earns as rent, the property increases in value in the range of 3 to 5% only. So generally it's a combination of the annuity income that you're getting plus the capital increase. So 7-8% plus a 3-5% there. So 10-12% returns and an absolute number. And if you're leveraged, etc., then leverage returns can be higher. What I mean by that is if you've taken loans, etc., then your returns could be higher because you've only put in 20, 30, 40% as your equity. The rest is coming in through loans. So on your return on your equity could be higher in that sense.
So you also mentioned India growth story, right? So definitely we all believe in the India growth story right now, and commercial real estate, you in the earlier question mentioned that commercial real estate of the country is doing really well right now, right? But the question here is, if I want to park my money in commercial real estate somewhere, you mentioned retail, you mentioned offices. But sir, you didn't mention the malls, because I can see, if we see the reports, we can see that there are a lot of ghost malls there. अगर मैंने अपना पैसा किसी mall में लगा दिया है और मेरा पैसा फंस गया, and that mall is, dead right now, a lot of ghost malls are there, then what to do?
See, this is something that has been learned the hard way by the industry. A lot of developers developed malls like a real estate business because they were doing residential, developing residential, selling that, or developing offices and selling that. They also did that in the malls, where they built malls and they sold units to investors. But a mall business is not a real estate business. It is actually a retail business. So a developer has to treat it like a retail business and think like a retailer rather than a developer, real estate developer. So we see the most successful malls that are there in India, be it in Delhi NCR, be it in other parts of India, are all fully owned by the developer, and not just fully owned but very actively managed. And by actively managed, I mean they're constantly trying to make that mall very, very relevant and very, very active. They'll keep churning brands, they'll bring about fresh things, they'll keep doing activities which will bring a lot of footfalls. They will try and run campaigns which will bring not just footfalls but actually sales, etc. So a lot of the developers who are very actively managing those see that their malls are doing well. But those malls of a certain large size which are sold, they tend to start stagnating and then eventually dying away, and as we call them, ghost malls, because there is no one actively managing that. There is no one person managing the entire thing. There are so many buyers out there who might not think alike, who might have very different thoughts about how a mall should be. So a zoning in a mall is very, very important. You know, if you go to any successful mall, you'll realize there are certain types of shops in, you know, or outlets in an area, certain types in, for example, first floor, certain types in the second floor, the food courts will be in the third floor, etc. What if that, for example, in a sold mall, what if for example, somebody who's in a certain place, he decides to, for example, there is a toy shop on the side and then he opens up a liquor shop, for example, right next to it.
Right.
It'll just disrupt the overall zoning of a mall, for example.
Right.
So, you know, so therefore, it tends to happen that people tend to take decisions basis just their own unit that they own. They go for highest rentals versus what is the best for the entire mall. So, those malls which are owned and actively managed by the owner. Now, it could be a developer or it could be, for example, now there is REITs which are managing large malls as well. But essentially, they own the entire thing and they manage it actively. For individuals who are wanting to partake in the retail bit, it's best to, for example, if they have, for example, the ability to buy and the ability to invest so much, good, you know, high street spaces or even good neighborhood malls, those are the places to go to where you would get decent returns, and these issues with large mall management don't come about. And these are active places where, so it is, for example, in Gurgaon, we see a lot of malls which are of, you know, 250,000 square feet, you know, 1.5 to 2.5 lakh square feet size come up very actively. Those are doing very well, and eventually the developers do sell units in that, and they are continuing to do well because largely they are either based, you know, they're restaurant spaces or they're spaces where they're coming up with food items and other things, etc. So those are daily use kind of, you know, or places where people will come on a daily basis rather than going to malls once in a while. So there the catchment area is small, and the kind of you know, outlets that are coming in are for the regular use, etc. So those are things that one can look at.
Sir, I have two questions very quickly here. One is for a very clear message. अगर मुझे एक ही जगह इन्वेस्ट करना है, सिर्फ मैं एक ही जगह इन्वेस्ट कर सकती हूँ इन रियल एस्टेट, तो मैं रेजिडेंशियल चुनूँ या कमर्शियल चुनूँ और क्यों?
See, अगर एक ही करना है तो I would still go for residential. Primarily because the availability and access to residential for individuals is far higher. Getting, you know, there is no point buying vacant commercial assets. Right. They're sometimes very difficult to yield, etc. Many a time developers initially promise fixed rentals, and then eventually it doesn't get rented, and people get stuck in office properties or properties which are not in demand. But residential, generally, if your decision making has been prudent, then my sense is that people tend not to go wrong, not to go too wrong in residential, because there is an innate, you know, huge gap in terms of what demand is there for residential and what supply comes in. Okay. You know, so there is still a lot of gap available there. So I would still suggest that residential real estate is the place to go in. Okay. Commercial only for people who have the right ticket sizes as well as have the ability to understand and go into and have basically a discerning mindset on what to buy, what not to buy. Commercial is also a good play, but I would still go with residential because of ease of access, and I would say there is far better liquidity at the end.
Okay. So in terms of amount, if we can say, जैसे फ़ोन का हम लोग देखते हैं कि 10,000 से नीचे तो कोई फ़ोन होता ही नहीं है. अगर मेरे को रियल एस्टेट में आज इन्वेस्ट करना है तो वो मिनिमम अमाउंट क्या है कि उससे नीचे तो आई कांट गेट एनीथिंग इन द मार्केट?
नहीं, ऐसा भी नहीं है कि रियल एस्टेट में कुछ नहीं अवेलेबल है. देयर आर, अब जितना आप दूर चले जाएंगे सिटीज से, पेरिफेरल एरियाज में, छोटे सिटीज़ में, वहाँ पर भी रियल एस्टेट है.
बट व्हाट इज दैट अमाउंट सर?
देखो, इन स्मॉलर सिटीज इट कैन बी एज लो एज 30, 40, 50 lakhs ऑल्सो. कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है.
क्या 20 लाख में कोई ज़मीन खरीद सकता है?
मिल सकता है, ऐसा नहीं है कि नहीं मिल सकता है. सो देयर आर एरियाज जो फार अवे फ्रॉम द सिटीज, जहाँ पे
कोई एरिया का नाम इफ यू नो.
Depending on क्या, देखो, depending on what eventually, again, nobody buys blindly, right? So even in smaller towns, for example, where the expectation is कि इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी रहेगी, वहाँ पर आपको स्मॉल फॉर एग्जांपल हाउसिंग प्लॉट्स वगैरह 20, 25, 30 लाख में मिल जाएंगे, कोई बड़ी बात
It's
नहीं.
possible to have.
It's possible, but one needs to have access, understanding, and also have the right expectations out there. क्योंकि जितना छोटा शहर रहेगा उतना ऑब्वियसली इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज लिमिटेड होंगी और दूसरे चैलेंजेस होंगे और बायर पूल वुड बी स्मॉलर एंड ऑल दैट. टिकट साइजेस कम होगा तो आपके और चैलेंजेस भी डेफिनेटली आएंगे साथ में.
So lastly, what's your top advice for someone who is looking at real estate as a long-term portfolio?
नहीं, लॉन्ग टर्म में शॉर्ट टर्म में बेसिकली प्रॉब्लम्स आते हैं और वोलेटिलिटी, बट लॉन्ग टर्म में जनरली इट वर्क्स आउट. सो इफ़ यू कीप द राइट फ्रेम ऑफ माइंड एंड बेसिकली मेक अ रैशनल डिसीजन कि ऐसी जगह पर लें जहाँ पर ओवर वैल्यूड ना हो, जहाँ पर इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी हो, जहाँ पे इवेंचुअली फ्यूचर में भी कुछ ना कुछ आने वाला हो, then you can't go wrong. In the long term, you will make money in real estate as well.
Thank you so much, sir. It was great talking to you.